Hi there, I'm Trish Thompson, and I am a school psychologist and have been for 20 years. And I also have my own business called Learning Without Limits, where I do behavior and learning coaching. I'm also a mom of 3 kids, 2 of which have had pretty significant learning differences. So that's why I started my business, was just a way to support parents and families through some of the hard stuff that I've gone through, that my professional training really didn't prepare me for. It's one thing to have knowledge and be good at working with students and teachers. It's another thing to manage that in the 4 walls of your own house with all of the emotions and all of the stuff that comes along with it. So I have a little bit different perspective because of that. And that's why I offer coaching to families. And so I have a long-term colleague, Tracy Vitellaro, your school counselor, who asked me to make a little video for you about all of the anxieties that both ourselves as adults and our children are facing right now. You know, the global pandemic and being out of school for 6 months and distance learning and job stresses, and now in Oregon, the fires, and it just feels like the hits just keep on coming. And it creates a lot of angst and anxiety. And whether it be like a full-blown anxiety disorder that meets a clinical definition of anxiety, or just some intrusive anxious thoughts, some difficulty sleeping, some mood problems, tantrums for kids, irritability on our parts, whereas parents, we have a shorter fuse than we would like to have. Whatever that is, I'm going to talk about how to help us manage some of those feelings in a really more effective way, so that you can feel good about the input that you're having. And that doesn't mean that you're going to fix the feelings. You're not probably going to get rid of anxious feelings right now. Those are just going to be, and that's okay. But we can feel empowered and less imprisoned by those anxious feelings, and we can also do that for our kids. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. Okay, so I'm going to start with just some facts about anxiety and why I have the perspective I do. Number one is, we know for sure that parental response is one of the most important pieces of how we manage anxiety. So if you look at an anxiety disorder, for example, our research tells us that the most effective therapies have been a combination of medication and cognitive behavioral therapy. And numbers on parent training have actually shown that parent training are at least as effective as both medication and cognitive behavioral therapy together, and probably lead to longer lasting change. So just changing the parental response to anxiety is that powerful. It's as powerful as these other forms of treatment. So that's always where I begin. It always begins with us. Unfortunately and fortunately, it begins and ends with us, and our response to our children's anxiety and to our own can be so powerful and huge. So I'm going to give you some tools about how to manage that today. We're going to start with you. Let me get on my notes here, because I wrote down a lot of stuff I want to tell you. Okay. So what we're going to do today is we're going to shift our mindset from fixing or managing your child's anxiety to managing your own anxiety and responses, because that's where we get the biggest bang for our buck. And traditionally, when our child is struggling with emotions, depression, anxiety, any of those things, our traditional model and our instincts lead us to want to fix it and help it and get rid of those negative emotions. And that is time not very well spent, and actually often can make the problem worse, because what we do is we go into this over-accommodating Fixit mode. And there's a quote that I heard that I just love, which is, reassurance is anxiety's worst best friend. We are drawn into this thing where we feel like we have to solve the problem and get rid of the anxiety and fix it for our kids. And in so doing, we create this loop that encourages the anxiety to flourish and continue. So we're going to put a stop to that today. We have 3 kids at home, so if anyone comes down the stairs or you hear like, dance music, that's what it is. So I'm going to tell you a couple things that I hope you find reassuring. And we're going to manage our expectations about what can we expect right now, given all of the stuff that we're all dealing with. What can we expect? Number one, you can expect to be a little off your game. You can expect to have a short fuse, shorter than normal. We all have capacity, right? And that's a finite resource. This capacity, this willpower, this ability to stay calm, to do our best, to use our best skills, to keep our emotions in check. There's a capacity and a finite resource there. And when we're overtaxed consistently, like many of us have been for months and months and months, our capacity is lower. So you'll find yourself blowing up, losing your temper, yelling at your kids, whatever it is that you do when your capacity is low, withdrawing. Expect that you're going to have a shorter fuse. And don't beat yourself up for that. Guess what? You can also expect that your kids are going to have a shorter fuse. So sometimes the cooperative child that you had is suddenly refusing all distance learning, or they're crying all the time, or they're yelling at you, or they're having tantrums and showing babyish behavior, or they're having sleep struggles. You and your kids can expect to have a little shorter fuse. And I'll talk about what the remedy to that is in a minute. But we're going to talk about what our expectations are, because often if we have high expectations of ourselves to be perfect, to never lose our temper, to show up with all the right answers, what we create is expectations that can't possibly be met. And really on a brain level, that doesn't serve us or our kids. On a brain level, unmet expectations create plummeting dopamine levels. And dopamine is a neurotransmitter in your brain that is a chemical that causes you to feel good, that reinforces behaviors, so you're more likely to repeat behaviors that are associated with a dopamine release. And it's a chemical that is our reward chemical. It makes us feel good. So when you're disappointed and you have unmet expectations, our dopamine levels plummet. And that's why when you feel disappointed, you might even have that physically sinking feeling because you're having a physiological response. And there's been a lot of disappointment lately, hasn't there? We're not going back to school. We canceled vacations. We don't get to see everyone that we want to see. Perhaps loved ones have even been sick. Maybe jobs have been lost. The stressors are real and the disappointments are real. So one thing we can do is we can manage our expectations and we can know, hey, my fuse is going to be shorter. I'm probably not going to be at my best, and neither are my kids. Because when we meet expectations like, hey, this is going to be rocky, but we're going to make our way through it, that's an achievable expectation. And that actually increases dopamine levels. It's the opposite. So we want to look at our expectations and make sure they're reasonable and that they're achievable, and that we're not setting ourselves up for failure. And expecting yourself or your kids to run like clockwork and be on the spot and on point with good moods and all that good jazz, that is an unrealistic expectation. So expect to be off your game. Expect your kids to be off your game, and then own it. Say, I'm off my game. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling kind of stressed. It's okay to say that. Oh, I did that thing again. I lost my temper. I'm sorry. I'm going to try to do better. Here's what I'm doing. I'm going to go read a book. I'm going to take a couple minutes. I'm going to, not go for a jog right now because the air quality is too poor for that, but you're going to do something about it. Okay, so we're going to expect to be off our game, and we're going to give ourselves, our teachers, our kids a little bit of grace, and we're going to model taking care of our own business and cleaning up our own messes and putting in place some routines that are healthy for that. And I'll talk about what those could be in just a little bit. So that's one thing that we can expect. The other thing you can expect when your child is anxious and feeling negative feelings is you can expect to be triggered and to want to overprotect them and to go into protective mode. And there's a biological reason for that. We are programmed as parents in the mammal family to protect our offspring. And that is a brain thing that doesn't go away when they're 9 or 10 or 20 even. I know, don't tell me that, right? I thought at some point this worrying about our kids ended, but it doesn't. And when we're triggered, when there looks like a threat to our child, and in evolutionary times, that is a predator coming after your child. But in modern times, that's just any perceived threat. The threat of them not being good enough, of not achieving what they want, of being made fun of being hurt, of feeling so anxious that they can't go to sleep, those register in our brain as a threat. And that sets off this protective instinct. And you can't really fight it. It's just what is. It's just how it is. You have a protective instinct. But your awareness of that protective instinct will be quite helpful to you in these times of anxiety. You will see the instinct going. Okay, that's that protective instinct. I'm swooping in to fix it. I'm not listening. I'm trying to help. I'm trying to talk them out of their feelings. I'm trying to offer solutions. Those are warning signs. Those are warning signs that you've been triggered, that your biology to protect your child has been triggered, and that instinct probably won't serve them in this situation. So we look at that and we know I can expect that I'm going to feel overprotective, I'm going to try to fix it, and I'm going to try to solve it for them. And that doesn't serve them, so I'm going to put that aside. And so it's really important that you have a place to manage those feelings and those triggered emotions when they come up. That could be a therapist. Telehealth is really amazing right now. You can just get on your Zoom and have a therapy appointment. That could be some great books that you like to read, journaling. It can be listening to a podcast that's therapeutic and talks about some of these issues. It brings our awareness, heightens our awareness, so that when we have that protective instinct, we're able to say, I hear you, I get that, and now I'm going to respond. I'm not just going to react. Because our knee-jerk reaction is going to be get in, fix it, overprotect, stop the feeling because it makes me uncomfortable for you to feel that way. So we can expect that we're going to be triggered and that we're going to go into fix-it mode. That's what we can expect. Okay? So when you do that, don't judge yourself and don't feel bad about it, but recognize it for what it is. Not helpful. Not helpful. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of the remedies to that next, okay? So the remedies to some of these things that we can expect. We can expect to be triggered ourselves, and this is interesting too, in the mammal family, offspring are programmed not to face the threat and run. They're programmed to look to their parent. So if your child is feeling anxious, they're going to be looking to you instinctually to fix it for them. So there's this paradox there where they're looking to you and you're triggered, and I want to help you have some responses that will be more adaptive and helpful than that, okay? So we have some remedies to this kind of stuff. When you see that you're triggered, your fuse is low, and you want some things that will help with that, one remedy is routines and rituals. So routines and rituals are very comforting all the time, but especially in times of anxiety. So we don't have our daily routines that we have come to depend on that create predictable predictability and automaticity, right? Being able to go through your day without thinking, without having to worry too much, without having to make too many decisions. Those kinds of things are really overwhelming to children especially, but also to us. So create a new routine for your fall, around your distance learning, around your jobs, and make it predictable, enforce it, but also make it fun. Part of our routine should be fun rituals like Fun Food Friday, or maybe you've set up a student store like they do at school. Maybe on the weekends, on Saturday morning, you have a family breakfast together. Maybe there's a game night once a week. Just setting up some rituals around this that are fun. is really comforting. And routine and ritual takes time to set up. So you want to start it as soon as possible and be as consistent as possible, because it really will cut down on the anxious questioning. It will cut down on the sleep difficulties. And it will take some time, several weeks even, to feel like a routine. So get some routines started. And I offer coaching on all of this stuff because every family is different. Every child and learner is different. And so sometimes we have these general things we know work, and then we need help implementing the nuts and bolts of that. So if you need coaching, feel free to reach out to Tracy Vitalero, who's the school counselor at your school. She can give you my contact information, or you can look on Learning Without Limits on Facebook or on Instagram, and those are good ways to get in touch with me if you need some guidance about how to implement this stuff. So we're going to look at rituals and routines. Number 2, we're going to use a skill that is that we don't use as much as we should, which is listening. And that's a really hard thing to do because of that instinct that I talked about. We're triggered to jump in and do something, to fix it. When really what might serve our anxious child, especially in times like this, is to be heard and to have their anxiety witnessed by somebody. When you can just sit and be a container for your child, they can unload those feelings and know that it's okay. It's just a feeling. It's actually not something that has to be fixed. Feelings come and go. They're normal. They're reactions that we can't really control. And so if you can hone your listening skills and be a supportive listener that uses supportive language instead of fix-it language, that will really be helpful. So some examples of fix-it language is, oh, it's not that bad. It'll be better. Pretty soon this will be over. By the way, I say all of those things. I also have the instinct to fix it. Having training around this doesn't make it any easier. Like, I say all of those things, and then I have to go, oh yeah, that's not supportive language, that's fix-it language. So you're gonna have that stuff that happens. We can expect to be imperfect. Yeah? Okay, so you're going to look at your language. Are you telling them to get over it? Are you talking them out of their feelings? Are you minimizing their feelings? I don't know about you, but this stuff kind of sucks sometimes. And sometimes I just need someone to hear that it kind of sucks and nod their head. So what we can do is we can reflect back what we hear our child saying in their exact words. You hate this. You want to be able to go to school. And then we can say something supportive like, I get it. And that's it. That's the intervention. That's the solution. Thanks for telling me. I'm glad you could share that with me. I'm sorry this is so hard. Right? These are supportive ways to really listen. Make it your job to understand their feeling. If their feeling was a ball, that you'd be able to know every contour inside of it and how heavy it is and what color it is. Make it your job to ask those questions so that they know someone gets them, understands how they feel, and that it's not scary and you don't have to get rid of it. That's really, really powerful. And so I encourage people to make lists of like supportive language, like we just talked about. Like, I get that. Thanks for telling me. What's up? Is there anything you want to talk to me about? What are your questions about what's happening? There's a lot of stuff going on. And then just listening and saying back to them what you hear them say. Those are really, really important remedies. The third remedy that I'm going to talk about is boundaries. You have to be a supportive listener and set boundaries. It's like being on a balance beam. Whoa, right? We want to be nurturing. We want to understand. We want to be connected to our kids. And it is our job to provide fences and boundaries. That is what creates their security. And it can be really tempting when we're triggered to protect to also bail our kids out and overcompensate for them. And that's a danger I would really urge you to resist if you can. And we can resist that by setting clear, consistent boundaries. My expectation is that you get on your Zoom calls on time. That doesn't mean I'm not going to listen about how hard it is. I'm not going to be supportive. I'm not going to get it. And I'm going to say, I know it's hard, and I expect that we continue to do the things that we really need to do. So I expect you to be on your Zoom call. That's one of my expectations. I cannot give you your expectations for you. You have to really think about, what are my non-negotiable boundaries, and what are the things I can be a little bit more flexible on. And that is different family to family. But know what those boundaries are, and then be really structured about them. And not in a punishing, shaming way, just like a gravity kind of way. Gravity just is. Like, we don't argue with it, we don't question it, it just is. And that's how your boundaries need to be. I hear you, I get it, and I'm not comfortable with you being late to your Zoom calls, so that's what I'm gonna expect, right? And if they need help, if they need counseling themselves, set that up, right? If you wanna talk to your school counselor to get some ideas, great. But that's why you can see there's so much work on our part as parents to manage our own feelings and emotions so that we can effectively do these things, right? So that we can effectively recognize our own triggers and resist the urge to overcompensate and fix things, that we can have the capacity to listen and to set boundaries. All of those things in the midst of this time, when our anxieties are high, takes an incredible amount of courage and stamina. And so find the place where you build your stamina. What are the things you love to do that fill you up? Make sure that you're doing some sort of version of those things that you can do during these times. And seek out answers and counsel and support. Because if your emotions are not managed, your capacity will be low and you will be less effective. So your job is to show up at capacity if you can. And if you can't, to do the best you can to do that, right? So again, that's another thing I provide coaching on, and I'm happy also just to do free little 15-minute consults if you just need a book or a podcast or an idea of what your resource might be, right? Okay. So then comes down to the nuts and bolts of, like, how do I talk to my kids about this stuff? Fires, evacuations, school cancellations, people being sick, things that feel scary, that are scary, that are unpredictable. I'm going to give you just the quick little tips on how to have those conversations in an effective way too. Number one, again, I'm like a broken record here. You've got to manage your emotions first. You're not going to be effective at having calming conversations if you're all fired up. So you've got to find some daily practices that keep you grounded so that you can respond instead of react. And that is your biggest job right now. And what is amazing about that is when you do that work, it not only makes you a better parent, it makes your experience of this stuff better, more peaceful. So that's why I really encourage you to do that. So that's the number one, is manage your own emotions first so that your responses and answers to your kids' questions aren't anxiety and angst filled, okay? You're gonna answer questions honestly and factually, but you're gonna give age appropriate information, and you're really gonna stick to the bare minimum facts. How do you know what to say and what questions your kids have? Let them be the lead. Kids will usually ask questions as they process things that they're fearful about or worried about. So let their questions guide you as to what kind of information they're seeking. Really listen. And then, you don't have to give them the whole gamut of information. They don't need to be watching the news with you. In fact, they shouldn't be. But you're going to answer their questions factually, truthfully, and kind of like succinctly if you can, right? So for example, also with a focus on safety. So like if you were answering questions about the fire, you would say, if it's true, like for me in my neighborhood, there isn't a fire nearby that's threatening our home, thank goodness. And I'm also really thankful that they have all of these processes in place where they give people warning if a fire is coming near, and they have them they have a plan for helping them leave and get to safety. Yeah. So you can focus on that positive part, is that there are adults in charge. There are practices and policies in place to be helpful to people so that they don't find themselves in unsafe situations. And those are the kinds of conversations that are really helpful to have. Truthful, factual, following your children's questions, and focused on what safety measures are in place. Okay? I want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything about that. Yeah, those are the things that I would say. I didn't miss any of my bullet points that I had written down. And then other things that you can do, as we talked about, is you can make being at home fun. If you're stuck inside because of the smoke, make it a game day, make it a movie day. Like, just try to find some rituals and routines that make it fun. Kids also sometimes enjoy being part of a service project. So if there's a way you can be of service to neighbors, firefighters, doctors, nurses, anyone that are helpers out there, if we can engage in some helpful service projects, that is often a really empowering way for kids to do it. Kids also like tangible things. So you might have them make a collage, make a piece of artwork, write something down, write a story. That's a helpful way for kids to process, because as adults, we're really verbal, we're really left-brained, and kids tend to have that connection to their right creative brain, and maybe their verbal skills aren't as developed as ours, so they might need to do something tangible to kind of process through that anxiety and some of their worries, and some of those verbal conversations that we're having, okay? And yeah, like I said, limit TV and social media. Easier for our young kids, harder for our teens, because they've got their phone and they've got access to stuff that we don't have control over necessarily. But I think it's super important to talk to them, our teens too, about how the news is created to make us worried. What bleeds sells. So it's not always the most factual, it's a show that needs ratings and wants reaction. And so if we're trying to feel okay about stuff, it might not be the best source of information. So finding those factual sources of information that your teens can use, or even your really mature and kind of cerebral elementary school kids might need, a website that's safe to look at, that just has some facts. And, I'm talking really long. This is a half hour, and I promised I wouldn't talk over that. That's the deal I made with myself. So I'm going to leave that with you. And I hope that this brings you some peace and some little ideas and shifts that you can make that won't take away all of the stuff that is going on, and it won't even necessarily take away the feelings, but it might help us manage those feelings in a more productive way, in a way that feels less powerless, that feels less extreme. And if you need help with your kids, I specialize in ADHD and learning differences, other learning differences. Sometimes it can be a little bit more complex than just this conversation. You might really need some help dialing down and some specific strategies that might be helpful in your family. Feel free to contact me, make an appointment. I love helping and serving families, and I hope that you are all well and safe. Your family and loved ones are well and safe, and I hope some of this information was helpful to you. And I look forward to maybe seeing you on my Facebook or Instagram page. Have a great day and a good weekend, and everyone stay safe. Bye.